I think what we're seeing is digital teammates can kind of step in and take over 4 or 5 different things and really
Mhm.
sit as like a part, like a little sidekick, a little buddy. A lot of reps are kind of sitting there and just saying like, isn't my boss supposed to build this shit for me? Or like who's going to help save me and implement Gen AI for me because my boss isn't doing it and I'm just still prompting.
Like, it's funny, I had a group of investors tell a C-suite that like ROI with AI is really, really hard and like it's not easy at all. And like, okay, you've probably never tried to implement anything with AI in your life, investor.
We are in an era right now where it is our job to completely rework the way that our people work. And if you as a leader are not staying on top of this, your ability to continue to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to quickly diminish. Welcome to another episode of the AI Powered Seller. If you are a CRO or a sales leader who's like, hey, you just got to figure this out and do more with less, your quota is getting ready to go up, etc. You're grinding 60 hours a week and now it's, more pipeline, more personalization, or more than ever before, more volume, etc. I'm telling you right now, today's episode's for you. We're going to talk through some very, very, very tactical ways that sales reps and sales leaders are leveraging Gen AI to cut through the noise. Not just your prompting, not just, oh, here's a quick tip, but some tactical assistance, some tactical ways that you'll be able to deploy it, whether it's from prep, whether setting more meetings, closing more deals, etc. And I'm super pumped for today's guest, Ryan Staley. Ryan is the founder and CEO of Whale Boss. I've known Ryan for, I don't know, 10 plus years probably. He's helped 2,500 go-to-market leaders multiply output without adding headcount. He's taken divisions of companies from 0 to 30 million with just 4 reps. No SDRs, no marketing. That's what I'm talking about. And what's this guy's secret? Why did I think he would be a good person for you to hear from? Is it's not treating AI like a helper that you prompt. It's training it like a teammate. And so if you're somebody that's stuck in prompt mode, or maybe you're trying to figure out why AI, this episode, the 2026 AI Mindset Shift episode, is for you.
AI Powered Seller.
All right, Ryan, excited for today's conversation. As usual, we're going to talk a little bit about AI and about its impact. Today's episode is all about mindset in 2026. So help me to understand for you, when did you realize that AI was not another technology? Like, where was there a moment where you started to realize, yeah, this is like different?
Yeah. Great question, Matt. So I think and by the way, thanks for having me on. Love being on the show and everything like that. So I'm excited. I guess to answer that question, there's kind of 2 really core things, or maybe 3 things that happened. One was I had a guest on my podcast called The Scale Up Show, where about 3 years ago, Chris Savage, who is the founder and CEO of Wistia, had me on. And afterwards, he's like, hey, Ryan, he's like, have you heard of the tool Dolly? And I'm like, what the hell is Dolly? This is like the image generation version 1, right, where it was it was terrible, man. It was absolutely brutal. But because of that, I got on early access to ChatGPT. So that was kind of my epiphany moment, right? When I started using it. I guess what really internalized it for me was that, remember when they had on LinkedIn, hey, let's see if AI could replace me with my job. And there was people testing it out. This was GPT 3.5. And it was all over the place. And people are like, yeah, meh, it only does 60% of what I could do. I'm fine, right? That was people's attitude, right? Well, what I saw in there was I'm like, all right, I'm going to stress test this against something that took me 10 years to learn in enterprise sales. And that was really how buyers were evaluated, compensated, what was specific to their vertical niche. And then what really drove the business all the way from an executive perspective down to an individual department, all the way up to the board and investors, right? And it got 95% of the way there in 3 questions. And so that was one of the things that absolutely, I'm like, holy shit, this is going to be completely different than everything else I've ever seen. So I would say those were kind of the key moments in time.
Yeah, I had one very similar. I remember afterward, and now I've kind of coined this. I call it the AI pit of despair, where you're really excited about it. And you're like, wow, it can do this and this and this. And then you test it and it does things. You go, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And then you fall into the pit. And then you kind of come out the other side where it was it was actually, I think maybe the exact same, a deal evaluation thing, where it's all right, well, can AI actually break down and help to give advice with really no context on what are the steps in a good mid-market enterprise deal? And it gives the advice. I'm like, pretty good. That's 80, 90% there. And it has always 1 or 2 good ideas. You're like, oh yeah, that's probably smart. right? And then it goes and finds the stakeholders in real time for you and everything. So I think a lot of people have had that moment. And for those of you listening, don't be scared of that moment. Like, it is what it is. That's what I try to tell a lot of sales leaders, Ryan, is like, look, you have to know what this thing is capable of so you can harness it. Right. And I think that kind of segues into this next question I've got. One of the things you said is AI isn't just about productivity, it's about liberating intelligence. So if I'm not answering deal questions, what can
Mhm.
I do? How is this liberating my intelligence if my job isn't as a sales leader to answer the exact same question 500 times in a year?
Great question, man. Okay. So we could hit this on a lot of different areas. I think like I've seen it with a wide range and I've used it. And I'm going to use some like non-work examples and then lead into work examples, if that makes sense. So I think, one of them actually was a guest I had on my show. He basically journaled electronically, put all his journal entries into a GPT. And he had lots of stuff about how he worked with his son. And his son, I think, had like extreme ADHD and some other like challenges that made it hard from a parenting perspective to really like understand like how to work. And so he would actually rely on and kept updating the instructions on how to work. And it helped him like kind of co-parent in like a non-objective way. And he said it's worked out really, really well for his and his son's relationship. So like that's one example where it's like you're tapping into a mind of someone else to do that. From a health perspective, so that's like parenting, right? From a health perspective, one of the things I did is basically I had like a chronic condition that was happening. I'm not going to really get into it, but it was something that I went to multiple doctors on and I asked them, questions. They're like, try this, Ryan, try that. Didn't work. Nobody could diagnose what it was. I took all my blood hormone tests, created a really killer like prompt around being like a pattern recognition expert in terms of like health and chronic illnesses. And it basically identified it for me in a snap and it's pretty much gone now. So like
That's
that's
awesome.
on the health side, right? So I'm not a doctor by any means and I'm don't have that skill set. And then last but not least is like I've seen executive teams do top down and bottom up planning for the entire year and with like KPIs and very specifics in
Yep.
like 45 minutes. Right. That process used to take days. So those are three like core examples that come to mind.
Yeah, and I think the key is like what you're getting at. I mean, it was able to sift through like data. It wasn't, and it was able to kind of pull through and pull out it to get to like first version of insights quickly. And I think for a lot of people, that's how we have to think about this because then you still have to turn your brain on, right? Then you still have to say, hey, as an exec team, how can we actually manage this? Is this possible? Even going back to like your health piece, it's like, okay, this has gotten me to here. Now let's go validate. Let me go inspect. And it's a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. That's whenever I hear, what you said around call it creating, space for more, I call it like creativity, resourcefulness, etc. That's what I love about it, right? Is like I can get now to V in the same amount of time it took me to get to a rough draft. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is where I feel like the unlock is. I'll give you a really practical example. One of our clients, they're getting ready to plan for SKO and she surveyed the entire org. 50 plus people responded. And then she's like, okay, let's summarize this and put it in. I was like, okay. There's two different ways I could summarize. You can go read every single one. And look, let's be honest, some AI, if it's reading 50 different rows and 80 columns, it's gonna mess up. Like it's still not perfect in terms of those sense. Or I could just summarize it with ChatGPT Pro and it'll take 10, 15 minutes and it'll be pretty good. And it's like that to me is a good example. It's like I probably don't need to
Mm-hmm.
pour over all of this. I now can actually trust but verify. I can get a really good like outcome, spend another hour just kind of combing through for the nuances instead of taking 5 hours. And I think that's where when I think about liberating intelligence, it just allows you to save time and also do a more thorough job,
Yeah.
when people are already, okay, look, if you are somebody who can feel what we're talking about, these different AI use cases, you're like, Jake, how do I possibly make the time? We have got you covered. Okay. So if you're getting value from this episode, make sure to subscribe to the AI Powered Seller podcast. We do episodes every week where I'm interviewing somebody or talking about what I'm seeing in the market. And make sure to pick up a copy of the Innovative Seller, USA Today bestseller that I wrote around what you need to know about sales in the future and the sales around AI, sales with technology, the human interaction, etc. Subscribe to the podcast and make sure to go to Amazon, pick up your copy of the book as well.
I was kind of like you where I was naturally born through the the child raising of sales, right? Like there's a lot of other go to market activities, and like I didn't grow up being a marketer. I didn't grow up being in a bunch of different areas. Now, granted, I touched all of them with the roles I did, but like if I just apply certain concepts and frameworks, I could operate at a level of a peer that's been doing the job for 25 years. So like that's another example, man, where it's just like ancillary skill sets that are close but not dead on with what your experience level is. That's where there's huge opportunity.
I think that that's that where a lot of, especially if you're a younger seller and you're listening, that it can just help you get up to speed. For example, when I was getting up to speed at a company, I got a binder that had a bunch of industry insights in it. And it was like, here's what's going on in manufacturing and this and this and this and all these things. And so it took me 9 to 12 months worth of and I was really good. It took me 9 to 12 months to get up to speed where I could have an intelligent conversation with a business owner in manufacturing and then switch gears and talk to someone in pest control and then switch gears and talk to someone in tech sale. It took a long time, whereas now I can get the insights. And I think one of the things I'm curious to hear your thought on, a lot of what we're talking to our clients about right now is there's two different levels to think about AI productivity. There's one, which is getting them access to information and insights faster. But number two is retention, retaining the information. And so how do you think about these two? Because a lot of I'll give you a good example. We built an account research assistant for one of our clients, and she goes, I want you to, at the end of every single one of these, prompt them with a 5-question trivia game to make sure they actually remember. And I was like, that's a really good idea. Like we need, because then they actually remember it. So how do you think about, I've seen conflicting studies. MIT says it's making us, dumber. Other people have said, actually, it's going to unlock the intelligence. How do you think about the balance of like speed to getting the information and parroting it versus actually retaining it so you actually can become a true professional?
It's a really good question, man. I wouldn't say it's making us dumber. I think it makes us smarter and different. Or right, it can make you dumber if you go down that path. Just like any social media tool can make you dumber, right? Just by using it. So in terms of like retention, I think and this is what I see with my clients too, with like large scale AI rollouts, is like the only path to retention, in terms of my opinion, is like doing, right? Like, because like you could have a deep research report spit 50 pages out, but you're not going to remember all that shit. Right. So however, if you start to implement it, and that's where it gets really exciting. I'll give you an example. This was like another kind of like apple falling on my head. I remember one morning, it was right after voice came out, and this was like GPT-4, not even 4.0. And I was shaving. I'm like, hey, you know what? Like there's this book I've always wanted to read, but I don't have time to. And so I'm just like, screw it. I'm going to put on voice. So I threw it on voice, and I'm like, apply, the 80-20 principle and deconstruct this book into 2 pages. Give me all the high points and quotes with exact examples, right? Something along those lines. And boom, it busted it out, but it verbally talked to me while I was shaving. I was like, all right, that's cool. I'm like, this is my business. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm focused on. Customize this book so I can implement this tomorrow, right? And it gave me an exact like implementation plan. I go, now make checklists and sheets and a daily routine that I could use to do that. Right. So like that's a quick path, because it goes all the way from like idea to execution in like minutes. So that's what I think helps with retention as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I think this is a good transition. So a lot of what we're talking about is using AI to do stuff we already know, right? Or some flavor of that, right? It's like, hey, I've got an assistant. Hey, AI, can you do ABC? I want to talk about the concept of a teammate. And we're talking a lot about this. We're kind of coining this term, this idea of like a digital teammate, right? Which is somebody who has, it really is just a series of automations that are just kind of orchestrated together. I mean, at the end, if you kind of look at its insides, like its skeleton and its organs, maybe just explain what that means to you. Like, what's the difference between an assistant and a digital teammate? And where do you see the impact? Let's start with like for sales reps, and then also let's go for leaders as well.
Yeah, I think like everybody kind of like defines it differently, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think like the best probably, and this is a great question, Jake, you're asking me. So like if I were to use a teammate, it's usually like a co-pilot could just be for like a single function, right? Like you're talking about that research assistant, like boom, bust out enterprise account research, do this, customize it to my company, all that stuff, right? Spits it out. A teammate, I think, would be something that could do a string of different activities when you either link them together, right? So you have multiple kind of assistants linked together to do that, or you have someone that does autonomous or semi-autonomous work for you. So for example, if I'm using a tool called GenSpark, right? I could take a recording like this that I'm doing with an explainer and then infuse the transcription and then have it totally put together my entire newsletter as well as thumbnails for the YouTube design. And it does all that in like a couple minutes, right? That's like a multi-step process. And then if we're looking at it from a leadership perspective, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and that's what I would say more from an individual contributor, right? We're talking from a leadership perspective. It's same thing. It's like, all right, I'm about to have a deal review with my rep, a deal strategy. Here's the transcripts, analyze all these, give me ideal next best actions and holes, right? That's an example. Or if I was like a leader where it would be a little bit different, and I would look at more of like an orchestrated teammate structure. That would be like where you're taking like transcripts, you're taking support calls, you're taking, details from your chatbot, integrating all those together, creating a customer brain, and then spitting that out, right?
Okay, if you are somebody who just heard what Ryan laid down and you are saying, my gosh, where am I going to find the time for this? The AI certification course is it, right? Shout out, we are wrapping up our very first cohort, which is really exciting. We've got the rep track, we've got the manager track. You'll see the AI certification badges all over LinkedIn. And DM me. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn. We'll put a link there if you're interested in signing up for the next cohort, or check out the pages that I'll link to below for the landing pages. You could just sign up yourself. But DM me, happy to give you more insight into what other people are doing to carve out that so precious time and get up to speed in just 12 to 24 hours on what's the latest and greatest with AI. I'll tell you how we're thinking about this is that when you go to a client or an organization and you're like, okay, so here's how this works. We take the Zoom API, we pull it in, we run it to 3 or 4 assistants. That's like your call grading framework, skills, whatever. Then we're going to, ship that to Slack, ask for a little bit of feedback, and then put the output into a Google Doc for the rep to be able to review. I'm just making something up, or push it to Salesforce or push it to, whatever template. We find that that's difficult for people to comprehend. If instead, and not comprehend, but more of just like really get a picture of. Instead, if you say, hey, Ava is our digital teammate that does your call scoring. And what Ava does is Ava takes your call, runs it through our 4 or 5 step rubrics, and then comes back to you with a personal development plan that feeds off of the previous conversations. We find that is more palatable. It's like, oh, cool. Like, and it's also like, I think less threatening maybe, and understanding of like, hey, what does an agent, what does an assistant do, et cetera. So for us, the concept of digital teammates, and even for us, we're thinking now about like, we're adding digital teammates into our accountability chart. Like we're building in like a consulting ops digital teammate. And what they do is running a consulting business, they analyze hours, they analyze project milestones, and on a daily, weekly basis, they're like, hey, what's going on? Like this one's behind. Do you need a new template? All those types of things they're able to do. And so I think of a digital teammate as something that is orchestrating, usually I'm going to call it more operational or consistent tasks, because even call scoring, right? Like if you go to a leader, he or she, if you put the same call in front of them, different reps, they're going to give probably similar advice. And so I think what we're seeing is digital teammates can kind of step in and take over 4 or 5 different things and really sit as like a part, like a little sidekick, a little buddy, right, Ryan? It's like sitting there helping you to do things throughout the day. So those are just like a couple of examples.
Yeah, I mean, everybody gets freaked out about getting replaced to some aspect of it, right? Or these AI tools becoming Skynet and taking over everything. So the other thing too, and I'm sure you've seen this, is like the branding of what an agent can do versus the actual execution of what an agent can do is massively different for a lot of companies, right? It's like night and day difference. That's something always to consider too, right? If you're looking through it. So I do like the teammates concept, and I use that as well on a continuous basis.
Well, so what, I mean, for you, I mean, it says, you've run 500 plus AI use cases. Like what would you say if somebody's out there, whether it's a digital teammate or a series of assistants, do you have, I don't know, maybe like top few where you're like, hey, if you're and let's start with the rep, right? Because I think here's what happens. A lot of reps are kind of sitting there and just saying like, isn't my boss supposed to build this shit for me? Or like, who's going to help save me and implement Gen AI for me? Because my boss isn't doing it and I'm just still prompting. If I was a rep today, okay, and let's say I had the ability to build out an assistant. My team had paid for ChatGPT. My team had paid for Microsoft Copilot. My team had paid for Gemini. I can build a gem. What would be the top 1 or 2 things you would tell them to build in, the first, month or two?
I would say, like, I don't think it's the same across the board because you have like high velocity SMB reps that are churning and going through demos left and right versus mid market versus enterprise, like on the sales side, right? And then, existing accounts. So the way I kind of look at it is like either there's kind of like three ways to attack it. One is like, what's the number one blocker to you hitting your KPI or goal, right? So that's more like outcome driven. Two is like, what do you waste a ton of time on as a rep? And then three is like, what do you hate doing? Right. Like you could look at it through any
Yeah.
lens just to start to facilitate adoption and do it that way. And so, for example, let's say you're on the enterprise side and you're doing massive account research, then like map out all your ideas and what you're doing and then create it once and ask for like, OpenAI to create, or I should say ChatGPT to create custom GPT instructions for that exact process. And then what it'll do is it'll take that process that took 45 minutes to do and turn it into like a 30-second process. And then you just kind of iterate on it, right? Like the time that it would take you to do one research process with that would basically, it would finance from a time perspective, the cost to make one to infinitely get, 35 minutes every time moving forward. So I think that's
Research.
super.
Research would be one that you would peg then? Like, again, like, basically building
I mean,
something
like,
out. Yeah.
and that's like, I hate saying that because that's common, right? But like another one is next best action. Like, I think next best action with like integrating your sales methodologies into that with transcripts is so freaking easy. It used to take me 45 minutes or an hour to do that. Now I could do it in 30 seconds. And it's probably better than what I would do if I did it all manually looking through my notes. So that's another example, is what I would say. How about you, man? What do you think are your top couple that come to mind?
I think, look, to me, research is a no-brainer. And again, because to your point, you're like, yeah, everybody says it, but most people are just prompting. And by the way, prompting is like not bad, right? If you're like, hey, I'm doing research, blah, blah, blah. The problem is most reps are still, and most people I think are still using very basic prompting. They're not layering things in. So it's like, I want to do this and this and this and this and this and this. And that's where, you don't want to necessarily copy and paste anymore. It would be easier for an assistant to just ask you those questions. And so I
Mhm.
think there's like, if you're somebody who's consistently doing enterprise deal, what is your enterprise research process? Well, great. Just put that all into custom instructions inside of a gym or an agent or a custom GPT. And then it says, great, what's the account we're working on today, Jake? And it's like, we're working on this one. And you could even upload a document of like 3 or 4 of your best account, research plans you've ever done. So I think research is an absolute no brainer. The other big one with more, again, maybe not less on the rep side, but I think digital CS/digital SE. Like, I don't need any more. Like, I'd say those are probably some of the more common ones, Ryan, that we're building out of the gate. Is I don't need to loop in a human to say, does this integrate with Azure or not? Or what
Yeah.
are the 5 things that I need to think about around A, B, C, or D? And so for me, I think I'm looking at these use cases where is there information that isn't really value add in the customer life cycle and really isn't even value add between the two people that are interacting, right? Like
Mhm.
product data. Hey, I'm a customer. I have a question. Hey, I'm an inbound lead. I want to book a meeting. Like, I think that there are certain use cases at the exec level, customer success, digital SE, inbound, that are those to me for the executive level are no brainer. And then I'll call it like research and prospect insights. We've got kind of a message framework we call the triangle, which is it basically says, okay, for this persona in this sub industry, what are the trends that persona is facing in that sub industry that we actually help to solve for? And that's where Gen
Mhm.
AI is really good. It's like
Yeah.
trends for industrial manufacturing, especially it's like specifically heavy equipment machine manufacturing for a VP of operations. Here are the top 3 headwinds this person's facing, and you have a product that does X. Here are the 3 things you should talk to them about. And that's where, that used to take someone 15 years in an industry. So I think building an assistant that knows, your version of good messaging, an assistant that knows your version of great research, that's going to get you a long way. And then I like the one you said, that's probably the if I had to pick a third, which we'd call that deal strategy evaluation, where it knows, and what we have it do is it looks at competitive threats, it looks at stakeholder map threats, right? Hey,
Mhm.
you're only talking to these 2 people. Typically, your deal has a CFO. By the way, I found it. It's Lisa Henderson. Here's her LinkedIn. Here's 5 things that she just talked about. So being able to build an assistant that I don't need to go ask my boss. I call it 100% deal coverage. Yeah, I'm going to talk to my boss about the top 15%, 20% of deals, but I can actually run 100% of my deals through some type of evaluation framework that should help to increase my close rate by 5, 10%.
Yeah,
So
I
I
totally
think
agree on that.
those are some of my, I don't know, like go-tos as a part of it. Tell me a little bit right now, what's holding people back? So we're talking about these use cases, right? Of like implementing these tools. The time savings is very obvious. What do you feel like is holding people back right now? Why do you feel like more people aren't leaning in? I know, look, we're all busy, everyone's busy, but why do you feel like most people aren't leaning in further?
So, and it's a great question, man. I think like there it like I think there's naturally people who are hungry to learn and others that aren't. And like, obviously your brain rationalizes to save energy and avoid pain, right? So like those are the two core things it tries to do every day. And so like there's a couple things that it influence. I think what's holding people back is like things are moving faster and faster every day in terms of the number of releases, the quantity of releases, the number of SaaS tools that are released. And so it's just so overwhelming that people decide to do nothing, right? Like, I think that's number one. Number two is I would say, and like, it's why your business is doing well and my business is doing well right now. It's like, um, if companies aren't like sponsoring this and saying this is a priority, then most people don't come to that conclusion on their own. There's a fraction of power users that do, right? And those are the power users. And then if that doesn't happen though, innovation happens in the dark and you lose all that insane tribal knowledge integrated with AI for those power users. If you like bring it all together through like a corporate led approach with a top down and bottom up, then that's when you start to really see things take off. So that's what I would say, man. Top of brain.
What do you feel like? What do you feel like at the top? What's stopping people at the top from diving in? Why do you feel like leaders are, and again, maybe they're not reticent, but they're not doing it. Why do you feel like from the top down, there's struggle points to kind of really get started on this AI journey?
Yeah, I think a couple points. I think, one, a lot of it's fear driven, to be honest with you. And so now that we're reaching more of a level of maturity, like it's funny, I had a group of investors tell a C-suite that like ROI with AI is really, really hard. And like, it's not easy at all. And like, okay, you've probably never tried to implement anything with AI in your life, investor. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other thing at the top of like why someone wouldn't is like the median tenure of a CRO is 15 months, right? So it's like their time to execute is so freaking tight. If they don't do that and they just look at this as like another barrier sometimes of just focusing on just doing the work of like hitting the number, right? So I think that's the other thing, man, that's super, super critical. What do you think on that side? Are you saying the same thing?
I mean, time is certainly a part of it. ROI, here's what I would tell you, just in general, and all my sellers know this, time savings is the worst sales argument. We as
Mhm.
humans struggle to properly credit certain initiatives as like the correlation or direct impact on a productivity gain metric, right? We love revenue gains. We love, whether that's, dollars or whether that's volume based, but I'll just, in general, productivity gains are difficult. Now, the good news is, how we're doing it with AI is we're mapping how long a job takes to be done today. Okay, this is what is happening. We're going to build an assistant around X, and here is the actual impact. Here are the user logs. The user logs say this job used to take 19 minutes. They're now doing it in 5. And let's say I only get credit for 40% of that gain. Another 40%, they're just using it to mess around and not to sell. That's real money. That's a lot of money. And so that's how we're trying to quantify it. And then the other thing that I try to, this is my favorite one for a CFO. When they ask that, I go, okay, what's the ROI on NetSuite? And they go, what do you mean? I go, what's the ROI on NetSuite? How did you quantify the ROI? Well, it's obviously better than the way that exactly. What's the ROI of Google search? Well, it's better than going to the library. What's the ROI of Salesforce? All of these are about making our people more effective and more efficient. And so I think you really have to think of AI in that bucket. That AI CFO is NetSuite. It is obviously better than Excel docs and version control and people
Mhm.
not adhering to processes, as opposed to, I'm going to manually go to Google search and LinkedIn and do this and go to a website and think and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's obviously better and faster. But I think, look, if you can tell the ROI story, all the better. But I feel like there's a gap at the CFO level. I agree with you 100% on the time at the leadership level. And I think reps actually are just way outpacing leaders. I think reps are coming, to your point, the bottoms up play. I think reps are coming up with all kinds of smart, innovative ways to do things. And if they even had the opportunity to learn how to build assistants or agents, it would be even more effective as a part of it.
Yeah,
So
there's definitely some that gravitate towards it. I think, yeah, I think there's definitely elements of truth to that with at the rep level. I have seen, though, I will tell you this. I've seen a ton of reps just using basically these AI tools like an enhanced version of Google, and that's it, right? Like that's the other thing that I think a lot of people
right.
are lying to themselves or about their AI competency because they're like, "Oh, I use AI every day, multiple times a day." And it's like, how do you do it? I use it to look up stuff like Google. I'm like, well, that's you're getting like 1% of it, right? So it's like that's an opportunity too.
I think, but that goes back to, I mean, it's changed a little bit, but we'll go and we'll meet with a client and we'll be doing something with their revenue org. And you say, how many of you use Gen AI every day? Probably 90% or more hands go up. How many of you have had any training from your organization on how to use it other than compliance training? All the hands go down. Right. And I think, but we're kind of in a cycle where sales leaders, you cannot afford to not master this. It is our job as leaders over the next 2 to 3 years to completely rework the way that people do their job. Like that, this is not a new technology. I'm shifting. Hey, you used to do this way. Now you do it this way. You used to do it this way. Now you do it this way. And that's the journey that we're all signing up for. If you're going to be in leadership over the next 2 to 3 years, is you are signing up to, it's the same way. Like, look, we didn't get to pick this point in time. Right? It's like if you were a sales leader, I wasn't, or a revenue leader or CEO back in 1995 or six, you didn't get a pick that the internet happened. Instead, someone had to retrain Brenda on how to send an email. Hey, Brenda, we're not doing that anymore. Hey, and we're not going to print our emails out anymore, Rachel. We're going to do this. Like, hey, Frank, we're not going to send the fax anymore. Remember the email thing? Like, that's a real thing that happened. And I think we have to realize that that's where we're at right now, that we are in an era right now where it is our job to completely rework the way that our people work. And if you as a leader are not staying on top of this, your ability to continue to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to quickly diminish because
Oh yeah,
I'm going to be able to
without a
bring
doubt.
someone much smarter, more effective and more efficient, and where you're just used to being the deals guy who just comes, parachutes in, gives deal advice, parachutes out. Guess what? Like to your point, how Ryan and I both found out about the power of AI was seeing how good it is at deal evaluation. And if you think you're better than me and Ryan, maybe you are, but I want you to go and run your deal evaluation criteria through it too. And it will be definitely an awakening for you potentially.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know. Maybe.
dude, I don't know. I agree with you, like in terms of reimagining what's possible with work, because like there's a couple things you got to look at is like, all right, how are roles going to change, or how do they need to change? Not just like how they're going to organically change, but if you're intentional about it, and then you're aligned with like updates as they happen, that's when you can get like a 2-year head start on your competition. And that's something that I'm starting to work with is like with clients on is like redesigning roles and creating outcome charts more as opposed to org charts, right? And it's really pushing people forward, and even if they're not at the bleeding edge of like executing that, the fact that they're already starting to do it now, they're ahead of 99.9% of people is what I would say.
All right. So what's next? All right. So as we start to kind of like wind down, wrap things up here, great conversation. I hope everybody out there had a ton of tactical takeaways in terms of, ooh, I like that thing Ryan said. Like, I think I can do that. And again, the funniest part is I was at a conference last week, Ryan, content marketing person. She was doing a presentation and she was talking about this, how they turned this kind of product-based asset into a custom GPT and it took off in adoption. And somebody, an older gentleman asked her a question and said, how long did that take you to build? She goes, a few hours. And it's just like, that's all it takes. It's a few hours. And like, yeah, if she spent another few hours, it'd probably be like, even better. But where do you think this thing's going, man? If you had to predict in maybe next 6 to 12 months, what are some of the exciting use cases? What are some things that people need to be thinking about today?
Well, it's a great question, man. I think everybody is going to get promoted to be a manager. And what I mean by that is like, you're going to have the capability for folks to take advantage. Actually, have you used like Cursor 2 at all? Have you looked at that or
Yeah.
used that at all?
Yeah. Cursor, lovable.
But no, have you seen Cursor 2, like the newest version they just released a couple
No.
of weeks ago? Okay. So basically, they almost have like an agent interface window. So you could have multiple agents running at the same time and you could see what they're all doing. So what I think is like, and I'll do that sometimes with Claude Code or other areas, I'll fire up one on the side and have it do long form work while I'm doing other more tactical things. And then every now and then I'll need to respond. But basically, I'll kind of hybrid and use those like long form agents to do that while I'm doing my main job. And I think that's going to be a big change because the reasoning models are getting so freaking good with, I mean, I don't know if you saw humanity's last exam. I think GPT-5 is now at 47%, which is better than most world-class humans. So the intelligence layer is getting so freaking smart. And it grew 8x in 7 months in terms of like from the quality. So that's the other thing. Outside of that, man, I think like so everybody is now going to have the capability, especially over the next 12 months, to have these agents almost like sitting in a window that you could manage and orchestrate that aren't like these complex like N8N diagrams that you see from like the automation bros on X or LinkedIn, right? So that's what I think is going to continue to go down, and they're going to make it easier and easier for normal Joes and Bobs and Susies and whatever and Ryans to use it. And so that's what I think is going to change over the next 12 months.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. I think that and the other thing that I'll say is that you have to start to take time to learn this. And the other thing that again for a lot of you, I really want a lot of you to think about is this, is that you have to invest in yourself, which by the way, it might mean that you got to do this stuff after hours. You might need to take 5 hours, 10 hours on a weekend to learn this stuff because the alternative is what Ryan said. I want you to picture this world Ryan said. You got Jenny over here, and Jenny has 4 or 5 automation. She's figured this out. She took the extra 60 hours over the last 3 months to go and mess around with Cursor 2, etc., to go build her own assistant. And you're over here being like, but yeah, I had to go to Costa Rica for 2 weeks. And I had like my friend, like this is happening. And I'm not trying to, don't get me started with like the hustle culture and all this. This is not about hustle hard, outwork, kill your quota. This is about being super, super employable in 3 to 5 years, because this is a very real use case that Ryan just gave. He is doing this right now. Ryan, are you a programmer? Are you
No,
like a
never.
sales guy?
No,
I mean, like, and again, like,
never program.
we're a couple of, sales leaders, who have kind of woken up and realized that this is where we're at. So I just really hope everyone, again, you really start to think about your own professional development. I don't care what level, if you're 25 or 55, unless you're planning to retire in a few years, then maybe you're good. But we are entering a world where not understanding what is possible today will put you behind the 8 ball significantly in, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years.
I mean, I think it's going to be shorter than that, man, with how fast are things moving. I think it's going to be a year. And yeah, it's crazy. It's going fast. Amazing opportunities. And like on a party note, man, because I know we're just about up on time. Like the one thing, and you were talking about work on the weekends, like if I want to use Claude Code and understand it, I might watch like a half-hour YouTube video and I might only
Yes.
get 15 minutes the way through it because I'm pausing and implementing it. And it might take
Yes.
me 2 hours or 3 hours to do, right? But the next time I do it, it's 10 times easier. So like, here's the way that I approach it. And I was funny. I've gotten asked this question a lot is like, Ryan, do you approach it where like you have very specific outcomes you want, or do you just free flow it? And the answer is both. There's some times where I'm like, I got to get this shit done. I got a super tight time frame. Just go, 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 go. And I'm laser focused. And then I have other more like exploratory time where I'm like, all right, this is what I think. Let's see where this takes me. And that's where I see like helping me really advance development in terms of AI usage.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it's not about being perfect, right? And it's about finding a system that works for you. So Ryan, I appreciate you, man. It was
Yeah.
good to chat, man. It's been too long. We got to set us some time separately to just kind of go deep and kind of find out what the latest and greatest is. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining, man.
Yeah, man. It was awesome. Thanks for having me on the show.
That is another episode, everybody. Thank you so much. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to share this with one person, one peer, one leader, somebody who's like, man, I've talked to this person about AI all the time. I know they'll get something out of this. And make sure to leave a review if you enjoyed the episode on your favorite podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. I always really appreciate the reviews, and I take the time to read those as well too. So until next time, everyone, go build these AI teammates we were talking about.